Welcome to the final installment in this video series. This one, I admit, took the longest to compose because it tackles the advice part of the journey, and I find it's a tricky one for me because I think that pat blanket advice can come over as, I don't know, ineffectual, cheap, and reductive. It's like journalist Mary Schmeek put it, advice, like youth, probably just wasted on the young. Look, as far as general coming out advice goes, Out LGBT Wellbeing, the second oldest LGBTQ+ organization in South Africa, were kind enough to send me a very helpful guide on how and when to come out, which I've published to my blog An Examined Life. I recommend that you read through that as it covers most of the bases. As I'm sure you know, there are lots of other constructive coming out guides online, so do check them out as well. And for the record, as a cisgender gay man, I'm really not qualified to be dispensing with any advice for those who identify as trans, so I won't be addressing them in this section of the playlist. There are, however, plenty of amazing trans content creators on YouTube, so I invite you to visit their channels for guidance. I, for one, have learned so much from these courageous individuals who really put themselves out there. And even though I'm cis, I'd like to think that that invaluable education has helped me to become a much better ally to my trans brothers and sisters. But as far as my personal coming out advice and pitch to gay and bi men goes, I'm going to limit myself to the recommendations that I think are salient because, again, I don't like to dispense with elaborate, generalized advice since it tends to be too one-size-fits-all and everybody's circumstances are different and unique. How to come out, when to come out, under what circumstances, or if at all, is a deeply personal and, I would say, even sacred process and varies from person to person. So I prefer to offer tailored or individual advice by getting to know the details and intricacies of someone's character and personality type first before recommending a course of action. For example, perhaps you're a low confidence person who's lacking in the ability to really assert yourself, or maybe you're a people pleaser with poor boundaries who can't say no to anyone or feels extremely guilty or selfish when you do. Or it could be that you're someone who avoids or is terrified of confrontation because you confuse spirited, frank discussions with conflict. If any of these tendencies describe you, then I would hone my advice to specifically address those impediments first. And make no mistake, people-pleasing is an impediment. In fact, it's a grave impediment to both your physical and mental health, because chronic people-pleasing, by definition, is done so at the expense of self and is extremely detrimental. In fact, studies have shown that people-pleasers are especially prone to non-hereditary diseases like cancer because they suppress their anger, and that buried resentment and bitterness festers and manifests in the body as illness. As a reformed people-pleaser myself, I would seriously recommend some robust internal growth and development work to understand what informs this behavior before you even contemplate coming out. A helpful jumping off point would be to take a look at your attachment style, as well as your self-esteem or self-respect levels. A good therapist would be a useful option if you can find and afford one. I love therapy and have benefited enormously from it, but not all therapists are created equal, so shop around for recommendations. But first, I will say this though. If you're financially dependent on your parents or family and still living with them, I would be very circumspect about coming out to them if there's even the slightest risk that they may kick you to the curb, unless you have a backup plan or someone you can go live with. I've encountered far too many gay people who were thrown out of their family homes and forced to fend for themselves when they were as young as 13 years of age. So please make sure you have a parachute on before taking that proverbial leap of faith. Also, test the waters first. Read the room. Observe how members of your family react to LGBTQ+ content on the news or on television. That's usually a fairly reliable indicator of their existing attitudes or sentiments. If they say disparaging things about queer folk, then that should be a red flag of caution. But bear in mind that you can't know for sure if those attitudes are fixed. A lot of people need time to process these revelations, and many change their minds or see the light when it's someone they care about who identifies as gay. Take heart. If they're reasonable, thoughtful, and compassionate people, they'll come around and warm to the idea in time. Now, if you are financially independent and not beholden to your parents and family, and feel like you might want to tell them your truth someday, then here's what I would offer you by way of advice. If you haven't already done so, make sure you come out to yourself first. I bet you're thinking, yeah, of course, duh. It sounds like no-brainer, obvious advice, right? Well, not quite. You'll be surprised. I say this because all but 3 of the 100+ Indian pen pals who reached out to me and ultimately inspired this video series seemed extremely squeamish and uncomfortable with acknowledging their sexuality or giving it a name. They all seem to deliberately steer clear of using the terms gay or bisexual to define their orientations, opting instead for plausibly deniable, non-committal phrases like, I'm sort of into dudes, or I like to fool around with guys sometimes, walking all the way up to the line without actually crossing it to declare, I'm gay, or I'm bisexual out loud or in writing. Such is the extent to which they had internalized their homophobia and the shame that percolates from it. Because for them to actually admit that they're gay or bi would make it a definitive gotcha moment. So I say it. Make it official. If that's who or what you really are, why would you want to fight it? Own it. The pride part will come later, but first, you have to accept this immutable aspect of yourself and declare it or say it out loud, even if only to yourself. It's the first step towards jettisoning the shame and guilt. In fact, while you're at it, say a loud fuck you to the shame and guilt every time that voice in your head brings them up. That's just your internalized oppression talking, courtesy of imperialist propaganda and dead white prudes. So boot those fuckers out of your head and decolonize your mind. Because before you come out to anyone, you must end that war inside yourself and get out of your own way. The truth does indeed set you free, but the only way out is through. So come out to yourself in a big, bold, and unapologetic way. Self-acceptance is key. You can't expect anyone else to accept you if you haven't fully accepted yourself. It may sound like a cliche, but it's true. So own it, embody it, let it define you for the moment, in the now. Later, when you get older and wiser, you'll find that your sexuality defines you less and less. By the way, when you get to that super duper comfy chilled headspace, you'll have arrived at what's known as identity synthesis, the final home run stage of the Vivian Cass homosexual identity formation model. Do look it up and suss out which stage you're at. Because if you're still experiencing anxiety over being gay or bisexual, then I would suggest that you allow yourself to really sit with it and embrace it. Because although I don't know you and can't attest to the content of your character, maybe you're an angel, maybe you're an arsehole, I don't know. But as far as your sexual orientation is concerned, there is nothing wrong with you. Let me say that again. There is nothing wrong with you. You just keep telling yourself that. Look in the mirror if needs be and repeat it to yourself over and over again until it sinks in, until you start to grow confident and secure in that knowledge. Because when you are supremely comfortable with that aspect of yourself, those with whom you share it will often sense that fact and be aided in their own comfort levels and acceptance of you. So, work towards radical self-acceptance first, and the rest will follow. I emphasize this point because you're going to need that boldness and courage of conviction if you're planning to come out, especially to a tough room. Because if you haven't made peace with that aspect of yourself, I can assure you, you're going to have a difficult time of it if or when you receive any pushback or rejection. If you go into any coming out scenario or situation when you haven't confidently owned or fully accepted your sexuality, you're going to be standing on very shaky ground. And what I mean by that is, if you assume a posture and tone that's deferential and conciliatory, like you've done something wrong, or you're apologizing or asking for permission, especially to a parent or authority figure with a heavy-handed, domineering or paternalistic style, then I'm willing to bet that they'll try to steamroll you at worst or set very specific and onerous conditions for their acceptance at best, which, fun fact, does not make it acceptance at all. True acceptance isn't conditional. My dear friend William, a person I hold in high esteem and a man I consider to be my straight soulmate, who's watched all my videos in the series with keen interest and relish, just yesterday of recording this asked me about part 5 and that fateful night of my coming out to my dad when my dad threw the book at me and I threw it right back at him. He wanted to know if I was as composed and sure-footed as I described in the video, especially since most adult men and women are often still prone to uncertainty and intimidation around the authority of their parents. William recognized and noted that many kids are no match for their adult or older parents, especially if they're outmaneuvered, outwitted, and outnumbered by a mom and pop tag team, each taking turns to persuade their kid that they know what's best for them. Not to mention the arsenal of emotional blackmail and historical receipts these parents have at their disposal to weaponize against their kid to gaslight them and keep them in line. William, as always, made a great point. My dad may not have been a match for me, but for many parent-child relationships, there is a power imbalance that advantages the parent. So what I'm about to say doesn't apply to parents who are sympathetic to their gay kids, okay? How does one approach and come out to a parent or a figure who's hostile towards queer people? Well, come at it, or attack it, as I prefer to do, from a place of truth. Every time you fret or panic, keep circling back to the truth, because as afraid and nervous as you may be, the truth is the only thing that matters. Let it embolden you and feed your resolve. And if you receive pushback or hate, let truth be your sword and shield. It's the ultimate up yours comeback if someone judges, threatens, or rejects you. You can respond with, "But it's the truth. What do you have against the truth? I thought you righteous, upstanding people valued noble virtues like honesty and integrity. I'm sorry, but I'm speaking the truth and my conscience is clear." Or, "You know what? I have truth on my side and my moral compass is intact, thank you very much." In other words, keep reminding yourself that you are simply making a statement of fact. You were born this way. You have nothing to apologize for, so there is no need to plead your case. Don't allow yourself to fall into that trap of self-justification. Otherwise, bad faith types will immediately smell blood in the water or sense a weakness to exploit. It's daunting, I know, but as I said, steel yourself and get to a place of supreme comfort with your sexuality and be resolute in your decision to pursue a path that's true to yourself before you stare down your family. And if, like my dad, someone gets their emotional blackmail game on to accuse you of being selfish simply for wanting to be true to yourself, you say, "No, this isn't an act of selfishness. This is a sacred act of self-honoring." In fact, I would argue that it is you who's being selfish by attempting to deny me the path to wholeness and self-actualization. You have an opportunity to be remembered favorably by history in this moment. So with all due respect, step up or step aside, because I'm not just coming out, I'm coming through.
I think coming out perpetuated this idea that I'm asking for validation, right? And that's not what this is. Me coming out is, and I think people are trying to switch it to letting you in, and even that, I don't know if I necessarily wholeheartedly agree with, as much as it's, I'm telling you a fact.
Right.
I am gay. That's
Period.
the fact of the matter.
Yes.
This, you take with it and do with it what you please, but that is the facts that I'm telling you. And I think I'm also within well reason to say all of my facts at any given day of the week. I don't have to ask for permission to say my facts. I don't have to make them palatable for you to receive my facts. These are the facts.
Right.
Folks, this is your life we're talking about. Do you have any idea how many countless people throughout the ages have submitted to the autocratic will of their families and ended up miserable at the end of not only a life, but a life unlived? All that senseless pain and missed opportunity, and for what? Keeping up appearances. That's it, kids. If I were to offer you a silver bullet for making your coming out auspicious for you, it would be for you to stand up for yourself, because I'm of the firm and genuine belief that we teach people how to treat us, even members of our family. If we blithely or cheerfully accept treatment that demeans, disrespects, and devalues us, the message that people treating us that way will get is that we don't value ourselves enough, so why should they make more of an effort? There's no incentive for them to try harder or do a better job. And believe me, even the best of people can be guilty of this. I've seen it happen all too many times. So I'm speaking from considerable experience here. Who amongst us hasn't taken someone important in our life for granted without meaning to, because that person didn't speak up or say anything? So we were lulled into complacency and didn't make more of an effort until it was too late. So you show up and stand up for yourself. Know your worth and stand in your power. As I said, I think that for many of us LGBTQ+ folks, the bar is so very low because a lot of us have internalized the narrative that we are less deserving or worthy of love and respect. Most of us would be so happy with just not being hated or subjected to cruelty and abuse for what we are that we'll often confuse tolerance with kindness and acceptance. But let me say it again, tolerance is not acceptance. It's that friend I mentioned in part 3 who says, yeah, you're gay, that's fine, but I don't want to hear any more about it. If in the end you settle for mere tolerance as the lasting bargain with your friends and family, you'll be doing yourself a great disservice, in my humble opinion, because you'll find yourself walking around on eggshells all the time, censoring and policing your behavior and speech at every turn in their company. If that's a compromise you find acceptable in order to keep the peace, then that's on you. But I think you deserve better than scraps or crumbs at the table. We all do. You are not an offensive odor that must be endured and tolerated. You deserve to be affirmed, valued, and cherished by the people who claim to love you. So I hope that when or if you do come out, you'll have the dignity, self-respect, and self-value to set very clear and healthy boundaries and standards for yourself in the long run. By way of a cautionary tale and example, I know this young gay Indian man who, to his credit, bravely came out to his socially conservative parents, and after an initial period of rejection and condemnation, his parents eventually came around and relented on the strictest of conditions that he not speak about anything even remotely gay in their company or bring his long-term partner with whenever he went to visit them for the holidays. And he, clearly suffering from low self-respect and desperate to win back their favor, happily accepted these insensitive constraints without any protest or dialogue. And you know, the sad thing is, I can tell you this man's story without feeling like I'm betraying his confidence or trust, because I literally know at least 10 other gay Indian guys just like him with almost identical circumstances. That's how commonplace these sorts of stories apparently are in our community. In fact, these men eerily employ exactly the same phraseology to run cover for their families when their boyfriends or partners understandably agitate for change and recognition from their family. Don't stir the curry pot. That's what they all say, effectively chastising their partners for daring to speak out after feeling hurt and invalidated by the shunning and disrespect. As if a flippant, cute comeback like, "Don't stir the curry pot," is an appropriate, grown-up response to a life partner's legitimate request for respect and allegiance after they've been made to feel like a pariah and a dirty little secret. As though asking for the most basic of courtesies and manners from one's family is asking too much, that it's somehow considered outrageous and unreasonable. Do you see how low that bar is set? Now, please understand that I'm not trying to shame this guy for making that Faustian pact with his parents, knowing the kind of hyper-conforming, small-minded people they are. It actually took an enormous amount of courage for him to come out to them. But it does seem a great pity that he's prioritized his parents' own comfort levels and willful ignorance over his own partner's rights and feelings. I've actually cautioned this young man that there'll soon come a time when his partner's patience will run out, not because of his arsehole parents, but because his boyfriend may one day grow weary of having a pushover and an unserious, obedient little mama's boy for a life partner instead of a grown-ass adult who's capable of standing up for himself and his values. It doesn't exactly inspire admiration and respect. Now, if it were me in that situation and my parents dared to lay down those insulting and cruel terms or preconditions for my relationship with them, I would respectfully respond thusly. You know, Mum and Dad, I love you both very much, so it breaks my heart to have to say what I'm about to. It hasn't gone unnoticed by me that it's been quite a few years since I came out to you as gay. I did so because I didn't wish to insult the people who raised me by lying to them or keeping secrets. I felt that you had the right to know who your son really was and be a part of his life in its full and authentic expression. This understandably came as a disappointment and shock, and you needed time out to process and move beyond it. And while I appreciated that, I believe that I too have been very patient in waiting for you to graduate beyond half-hearted tolerance to mutuality and genuine acceptance. But instead, you continue to have me be silenced in this relationship, and that isn't acceptable to me in the long term. I did not come out of one closet only to be forcibly shoved into another. Life is too short and precious, and I refuse to live as a shell of myself in your company. Frankly, your terms and conditions are both insulting and disrespectful to me and my partner. If you cannot be prevailed upon to make more of an effort with me and the man I've chosen to build a life with, then I'm sorry. But I think it's best that I don't come to visit you anymore until you two step up and frankly nut up and announce to your friends and neighbors that your son is gay and proudly introduce my partner to them. Speaking of my partner, should you wish to continue to benefit from the pleasure of my fabulous company, I will expect you to warmly invite him too, and treat him to the same hospitality, kindness, and fawning affection you reserve for the woman in my brother's life, because our relationship is just as legitimate and worthy of respect, and I will not participate in the degradation and belittlement of it. Now, if this appeal doesn't turn your hearts and you still refuse to show respect and consideration for me and my partner, then so be it. It's your home, that's your prerogative. But I would invite you to take this time in my permanent absence to consider your nursing home years and how I don't intend to be around to take care of you when you're vulnerable and needy. This might sound to you like a threat or an ultimatum. It isn't. Think of it this way. I'm simply returning the favor of the kindness, compassion, grace, and dignity you've extended to me and my partner. Like I said, folks, we teach people how to treat us. Now, I'm sure there are many of you who think I'm taking too much of a hardline approach, but that's your opinion. I actually think I'm being quite charitable. Let's call a spade, shall we? This sort of cruelty, mistreatment of, and cavalier disregard for the feelings and welfare of gay children at the hands of their own parents may have been somewhat forgivable in the 70s, 80s, and even the 90s. But in this day and age, it is shocking and unconscionable. We know it's human to be frightened of the unknown or of things we don't understand, and back in my day, parents could claim to have their children's best interests at heart. So trying to protect them from a life of perversion or hardship was justified as an act of tough love. But now we know better, so that argument is baseless and bullshit. You people have access to all the mother effing information in the world right at your fingertips to raise your awareness about LGBTQ+ issues with a fuck ton of unprecedented research, studies, and empirical data to confirm that some people are just born on that spectrum and that there's nothing abnormal about it. Frankly, in our current online world, there is absolutely no excuse or justification for this level of stupidity, willful ignorance, and bigotry, but intellectual laziness and a deliberate unwillingness to challenge and address your ideological brainwashing and move with the times. No doubt compounded by moral cowardice born out of your own social anxieties and insecurities about what others might think or say. I'm sorry, but I've had it with all the apologia, excuse-making, and simping I keep hearing in defense of parents who treat their LGBTQ+ kids like shit. You people chose to be parents. Do your fucking job. Now, if you're not quite ready to come out to your parents or family, you might want to work yourself up to maybe telling a friend. I find that female friends tend to be much more receptive and obliging when it comes to such things, whereas most straight guy friends tend to get a little icky and uncomfortable around the subject for obvious reasons. Which is a shame, really, because believe it or not, a lot of straight men are often victims of toxic masculinity and its byproduct, homophobia too, especially if they exhibit so-called feminine attributes like kindness, gentleness, and compassion, or into activities and pursuits that don't conform to the rigid orthodoxy of patriarchal hypermasculinity, like, say, the arts. Now, if the friend you come out to is a sympathetic one and is open-minded and accepting, they might offer you the space and grace to talk about it more. If so, I highly recommend that you avail yourself of this opportunity because, trust me, talking about your sexuality really helps you grow into it and become more comfortable. It also eases any feelings of shame and guilt you may still be internally harboring. Now, if you are rejected by someone after coming out, it may be upsetting at first, but don't you dare lose sight of your own self-worth. I quite like how openly gay rugby player Keegan Hurst put it on his podcast, Happy Healthy Homo, which he hosts with his real-life boyfriend, Joel Wood. Do check them out. I think they're both doing such wonderful work. Keegan said something along the lines of,
so how's about we reframe coming out?
Yeah.
Right? Rather, because coming out is it's you bearing your soul.
Yeah.
This is who I am, and I am hoping that you approve. It's very putting the control in other people's hands in it. So if we reframe it as, rather than coming out, it's letting people in.
Yeah.
Who am I choosing to know something more about me? That's my choice that I choose to do. I am choosing to tell you this about me. And it also, if they decide to react negatively, you go, well, that's your decision to react like that. Off you go.
Yeah.
I think that's a really apt and lovely way to put it. So think of it this way. You were sharing a beautifully intimate and important part of yourself, and that this was a gift to the other person that the other person has chosen to reject. If rejection does come, and it might, consider whether the relationship was really worthwhile. Is any relationship so important that it must be carried on in an atmosphere of dishonesty, secrecy, and hiding? Was this person really your friend, or simply the friend of someone they imagined you to be? In which case, they never really knew you at all. So, bye, Felicia. Decisions about coming out must be made with deliberation and care, but integrity and self-respect are even more important in the long run. And I can assure you that for every friend you do lose, you'll gain many more for being your authentic self. Better yet, you'll have friends who will see you, love you, and accept you for who you are. As I said, we teach people how to treat us. Exercise self-respect if you want others to respect you. So no matter how the people in your life react, it behoves you to steel your resolve and again set and negotiate very clear and healthy boundaries and standards for yourself. You're a human being. Your life has value. The other bit of advice I would offer to gay and bi men is to seek out community. There are so many organizations, groups, forums, and channels that exist in the real and online world that you can easily access today. This platform, YouTube, is a great place to start if you haven't already done so, but there are also many other LGBTQ+ forums, discussions, and message boards that are very insightful and amusing. So feed yourself a steady diet of gay or bi content to habituate yourself and become congruent with your orientation by tuning into the conversations being had in our community and perhaps adding your voice to the discussion. Don't disassociate or distance yourself from that world because it will boost and reinforce your self-perception and gradually normalize your queerness for you. It can also be extremely useful in relieving any feelings of shame, alienation, or the sense that you're alone in the world. And who knows, immersing yourself in that world might also inspire and embolden you with the confidence to take your first coming out baby step. Consuming queer content will certainly equip you with the vocabulary to articulate your experiences, which will make it easier for you to give voice to your thoughts and feelings, whether you come out or not. As I lamented in part 2 of the series, I so wish I had access to these platforms when I was growing up. I'm still so jelly of you guys. I mean, this is a mainstream rom-com in 2023, folks. Lordy, have we come a long way. But don't get too excited, my fellow gays. The studios don't produce content like this to be inclusive out of the goodness of their hearts. It's because they're profitable. It turns out heterosexual women, especially suburban wine moms, love them some hot man-on-man action. So they're made primarily for the female gaze, not the gay gaze. Move over 50 Shades of Grey. We want 50 Shades of Gay, baby. Now, I can't promise that it will be a universally warm and welcoming world, because even within the LGBTQ+ community, there is sadly a lot of problematic behavior. Prejudice, body fascism, classism, colorism, and racism all abound. From my experience, some gay men can also be quite catty, cliquish, shallow, and materialistic at times, so manage your expectations, but don't let the mean gays put you off, because I promise that you will find your tribe or found family in and amongst all that. Keep searching until you find the people that affirm you. On that note, there are far more than 50 shades of gay, so please don't feel pressured to conform to the tropes and archetypes that the popular media likes to push and perpetuate about us. Not all gay men are hot, hypersexual, stylish, or fabulous larger-than-life characters. Some gay people are just middle of the road. We're into all manner of atypical things, from sports and gaming to farming and construction. So go wherever your interests take you, and I bet you there'll be a gay comrade in that club. We're everywhere, you know. Okay, this brings me to the conclusion of this epically long coming out magna opera. So if you've watched all 7 of these and you've made it to this point, wow, and thank you. As I mentioned in the introductory video, there was a lot to unpack in the telling of my story, so thank you once again for coming along on this journey. I sincerely hope this video series was helpful to you. If so, please share your thoughts or hit me up with questions if you have any, and please share this playlist if you think it might benefit others out there. I love that platforms like YouTube exist, but as I said previously, thanks to its algorithm, it isn't a meritocracy. Quality content doesn't translate to views and reach, so sharing this video series is one way of disseminating its message far and wide. As I mentioned in one of my blog articles, when my troubled pen pals reached out to me, I was overcome by a powerful paternal tug and a big brotherly urge to help them through their pain. And my motivation for producing this video series was to help them get past that suffering. So this video series is my cri de coeur. Please help me spread it. And in closing, I just want to say that I know that there are many of you out there who identify as LGBTQ+ and are terrified at the prospect and consequences of people in your life finding out who you really are. And that resultant gut-wrenching, stomach-turning anxiety can feel like an all-consuming, larger-than-life crisis right now. To some of you, it might even feel like the end of the world. But I promise you, years from now, your older self will look back at this moment in time and laugh about how extra you were being. It's become a cliche to say this at this point, but it really does get better. Until then, remember to honor and be kind to yourself. I'll say this once more. Your life has value and you deserve to be happy. Lots of love to you. Peace out.